Awesome. So it is October 12th, 2023, and this is another hallway hangout with the Full Sighting Outreach Program. And we're here to talk about the experience of building a block theme. And for context, I sometimes get messages from folks where they want to share feedback, and I help facilitate that into the GitHub repo, but a lot gets lost in those conversations. And one of the things I'm experimenting with, and Mike was open to, was to have a broader discussion, because I think it really does benefit the community to hear from a larger set of folks. So Mike reached out, wanting to share some feedback from a recent block theme building experience, and then was game to bring it all to you. So I'm very excited to chat about this, and I'm excited to hear from other folks to get a sense of what Mike shares resonates, and also get into, if we can, some sort of problem solving mode. It might include jumping in on GitHub issues and leaving a comment based on some of the stuff that comes up here. But I like to keep this casual and collaborative and loose, so we'll let the structure kind of make itself. With that said, I just wanted to kick off and ask like what I probably would ask Mike if we were just one-on-one on a call. What was your experience? What was on your mind that you wanted to share? And then feel free to introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Yeah, thanks so much for putting this together. I think it's a really interesting avenue to have chats like this. So happy to be here. Yeah, Mike McAllister, longtime WordPresser, mostly in the theme space. But yeah, and I'm building a theme called Ollie now. So you might have seen that recently added to the repo. And so yeah, so going through that process of building a theme over the past several months, illuminated all kinds of things. And I had seen that earlier this year and reached out, but it went to some dead Slack account. So I was so excited and bummed at the same time. I was like, oh, I should have had all this feedback when it was fresh, but here we are. Yeah, so I'll just start by saying like, I think some of this is going to be through the context of building a theme for distribution or wide use. There's going to be a lot of different ways to build a block theme, and the way that I build them might not make sense if you're building it for clients or something like that. And some of it will. It just really depends on the context you have. So, but just to say that is my experience, and I think that also informs a lot of other folks who are thinking about doing that. So yeah, I'll just I think I would love to address some things that I hear all the time in the WordPress community around block themes, and that I think there's been a lot of people who kind of tinkered with them a few years ago, and that formed their impression of them. And so I keep hearing these ideas of like, oh, it's all broken and it doesn't do that. I'm happy to report, as somebody who's spent the past year deep into it, that all of those concerns are largely like gone in terms of like the ground kind of moving underneath block themes and features being added all the time, blocks kind of changing. That certainly was a thing for a while as this stuff was forming, but the elements that you need to build a block theme are there. They're solid, they're reliable, they're not changing every day. And so you can build a block theme for distribution for wide use. Thousands, tens of thousands of people can use it, and it's reliable, and it's there, and it's in a really good spot. And so if you've had hesitations about that, I would just say, get in there and try it again. Have an open mind. And that kind of leads to my second point, is like, I think a lot of people jump in there and they feel like they should just intuitively know all this stuff because it's WordPress. I've used WordPress for 20 years, you do have to kind of treat this like a time investment, like you would any other new tool that you pick up. Even another page builder, you put a page builder on your site, you don't just intuitively know it. You have those first few days where you're so frustrated, you're about to throw it away, and then you pick it up and you learn more and more and more. And then by the end of it, you're like, this is my favorite tool ever. And so I think you have to have that mindset with modern WordPress. There's just so many new features, and there are some things tucked away, some little gems that you're not going to find unless you sit and spend those first few hours like really kind of racking your brain and figuring out. So I think just that kind of context of like, take this thing with a fresh like perspective. uh, follow some people who are building to kind of see those tips and tricks, and like really give yourself the time and the patience to like to learn this thing, because the end goal is that you can build a lot faster and better, and like it's just such a better process. So anyway, I'll pause there to let folks if they have any questions about that initial opening there.
I have like Ellen. I'm like curious what Ellen has to say about this because I know you've you probably have been a long time. You've been feeling the ground shifting, but I don't want to put you two on the spot. You came to mind as someone who I know we've had private conversations that I wish we had done this more of format before.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, first of all, I think it's really cool, Mike, that what you've been building and stuff. And yeah, I saw the process a bit, what you've been doing, and yeah, it's you've been going through it very thorough and like with a lot of like detailed. I think we kind of jumped on it a bit more naive and not as professional, maybe just kind of like jumping on it like I don't know how long it was ago, 2 years ago, just kind of trying things out and yeah, building like from very early on, and definitely felt all the kind of like, we are building maybe a bit too early and kind of feeling the pain points you've been talking about. And we've been this year we've took a bit of a break, parental leave, so we kind of just had the time to like view how everything is going. And yeah, the editor side editing, everything is evolving really great, but I think the adoption from users is still way behind of the potential we have at the moment. And I think that's the biggest issue we are facing now, that yeah, the reputation of Gutenberg and the whole project is still, with the main user base, kind of shaky, and people are still very attached to the page builder solution, or kind of have learned that these few like giant themes that can do everything that are in the repository, or the page builder template solutions with like 100 of page templates and stuff are just how you do WordPress. And I think it's not the possibilities we have with site editing at the moment, but rather how do we get the reputation of what we have available out there to the main WordPress user base. And I think that's one of the things, maybe while we were so busy building, has been missing, that the like not like marketing or like just the excitement and the possibilities, because it's been dragging a bit too long, I guess, the whole process, which is obviously it's open source, and that's what happens. And it's cool that everyone kind of has had their view. And I think it's also cool that some of the things like spacing and the responsiveness and font sizes, we did wait as long, but people complained tremendously because they were expecting that we would do the same things as page builders were doing, also with breakpoints and things like that. So I think this was the main reason that we are facing this like kind of bad reputation, or like people are not as interested as they should be. And I think the question now is like, how do we change that? What we've been doing at the moment is kind of, we switched from this like system building. We were like, oh, we have to have patterns for all themes we can interchange. What we did, like, okay, let's pause that for a while. Maybe it's too complicated. Let's think just like way less complicated and concentrate on like small, like just small, fun, cool design themes with lots of style variations, and just kind of like play with that. So we're having like 2 or 3 themes almost ready that are just kind of like that based, like just design focused and fun and simple and easy. So we kind of like learned our lesson from too complicated too early to, okay, let's keep it more simple. But yeah, I think actually the possibilities we have, like Mike said, are not the problem. It's rather like, how do we get people to use these things and to build with block themes and build with blocks and WordPress and get it like, yeah, full page templates. Like I see in the chat, I remember in January, Anne and Matt and I had a talk, and that was one of the main things, like get pages, because they're so popular on like the other platforms. Like they have hundred of ready to go about pages and things like that, and it's really attractive to people. And I remember saying that let's get the pages more attractive, but they're still not really nicely visible in the editor. But the 2024 theme now comes with all these ready to go pages, and I think that's one of the things, yeah, we can really emphasize, and maybe have a platform on WordPress.org to show these page templates. And I think one of the coolest things is the pattern library on WordPress.org, but it's not really working. It's like it has tremendous potential to show all these like page templates and stuff, but it's not really, yeah, it's like it's not attractive to look at the pages like we see here. They're like cut off, and yeah, maybe get them in the pattern library, something like that. That's just ideas, because the pattern library, I think, is I don't want to say in a sad state, but it could be so much cooler and showcase all the cool like ready to go layouts we can actually build with block themes and patterns. I'm stopping now.
No, that's exactly what I was hoping for, was kind of, that's like a balancing perspective. You know, Mike, I think you've, yeah, and Ellen, I do want to point out your feedback has been invaluable as you dove in early and often. So thank you.
Yeah, and we loved it. I mean, we had so much fun. It was frustrating, and yeah, and I had to come on the hallway hangouts, kind of like
yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, that's what you do, right? Just kind of try things out.
And now we're doing it again with the next generation.
Yeah, yeah, and we're still here. I mean, it's still fun.
Yeah, Mike, I'd love to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I've always been a huge fan of Ellen and what they do, because they kind of come from it from a very practical place, and they want the smoothest experience possible, and to be able to bring their designs to life. And I think that really mimics what end users want, right? They want the best possible design. They want it as easily as possible. And yeah, I think what Ellen said was really hits the nail on the head. We no longer have a technology problem in WordPress. The software is capable of whatever you want it to do. It's a page builder, and it's only getting better. It's a site builder. It's all of that stuff. And so now, you know, it used to be we didn't have the technology, but we had a ton of people building on it. Now we have all the technology, and we're having a hard time getting people to build on it. So those things that Ellen was saying about, you know, figuring out what are these little things that we can do to kind of change people's perceptions. How can we start showing the value of this thing in a, like, you know, in an excellent way, and change some developers' minds, and maybe inch people towards learning some things they have been maybe hesitant to learn. So I think there's a lot of things we can learn there. And I think some of the stuff later on we'll talk about, I think in the process of building block themes could help. And I'll be also curious to hear what everyone else's experiences are with that as well, because solving those problems, like if we can iron out the processes and the workflows of building block themes in particular, we can remove those hurdles and remove more and more things that are preventing people from diving in.
I also noticed this general topic is obviously very near and dear to my heart, just having run the outreach program and spending a lot of time looking at bugs, and then also trying to do a series of like corridor improvement posts. And I've been thinking about how to get that kind of information out to more people in a way that's more end user accessible, because like who's looking at Make Core? And so trying to work with marketing teams on different releases to highlight different features in different ways, where I think one of the issues that I will not go deep into, but one of the problems I've heard from folks is like when we announce a new feature, is it on a block theme? Is it on a classic theme? How do we distinguish that without, you know, walking that line of promoting things in a different way? So I think we can kind of coalesce around like a default theme in a nice way. We can push that, but it's something that's come up time and time again with marketing efforts. Because like imagine, oh, WordPress is this new feature, but it's only in a block theme. how do you communicate that quickly and concisely and in a compelling way? That's
Definitely.
something we need to solve. That's tricky. Each release it comes up. So yeah.
Yeah, I was really excited to see 2024 theme kind of step outside of the kind of where default themes have been and kind of be a little more robust and more just more like a real life use case theme. I feel like some of the past ones have been like geared towards blogging, and as blogging sort of, you know, comes and goes, I think it's hard for folks to kind of see their site in that. But also I think in creating a theme that is maybe more like something that somebody wants to run on production site, I think the core team is seeing a lot of the things that us block theme builders are seeing, and that what users are seeing in terms of like, no, this is kind of the problems you see when you're building a production site. Like this idea of pages is like so prolific, and that previously it would not have been part of the kind of default theme. So having those things, and then I think the more we get into patterns, and I have some more feedback about that later, but patterns, I just see so much potential there. And I think the more that we dive into those on the default themes and in core, the more problems we're going to solve, and the more like interesting and powerful things we can do with those.
I'd love to dive into that, to your other feedback
Sure.
on patterns
Yeah.
and kind of the pain points and what you've run into. Because I know, like, I mean, we have folks on the call, I'm pretty sure, who've been a part of 2024 too. So it'd also be neat to kind of get their intake.
Definitely. Yeah. Before I do that, does anybody want to interject or add anything to that?
I quickly want to just add that I think it would be so cool, and it's one of the harder things to do. And I know we've been like trying to do that a long time. I just in the Slack we see like Justin and Mike like pulling up these 10-year-old tickets of how we can promote, like as theme authors can promote the themes in a similar way plugin authors can. Just, yeah, like a video introduction would be something cool to have on WordPress.org, like if I see the theme, or yeah, just kind of like preview images and just the demo content being like more attractive. I think these like were easy steps to kind of should be easy steps to solve, but are not available for themes. And I think that's a little bit sad because, yeah, like we said, block themes are the introduction to all that what this new WordPress has to offer. So that's just kind of missing there. And I don't really know how we can solve it, but it would be great to do that, and maybe in combination with the redesign that is coming up, that is so beautiful and kind of more represents what WordPress actually is nowadays. And I can't wait to see that on WordPress.org. So yeah, I think that would be maybe a good point to kind of push that option.
I think so
Yeah,
too.
and
I
I
was
think,
just
yeah,
about to say
everyone
that.
agrees. Yeah, everyone agrees on it, but it's somehow not happening. And I think there are technical reasons behind it. I think, Justin, you know more about that. But I don't just know why can't I do like an introduction video, and maybe also show with these like new community themes come up, like show the author behind the theme and kind of give us like a voice more, and yeah, a better option for demo content. And I mean, we have like the preview patterns, that is amazing, but that could, yeah, the redesign will feature that more, but maybe we can do even more. Or I hope we can do more.
Yeah. If I can add there, yeah, we're talking about like the readme.txt parsing. I mean, we've had the ticket there for 10 years. I don't know that anybody's just really taking the time to the system's already in place for the plugins. But also sometimes I don't know if that's the right direction. There are other things like the WordPress Playground that I think would be huge once we were able to, really live preview themes, get away from the current demo system. I know there was a little, it was implemented on the plugin directory there for maybe a day or so. and it had to be rolled back. But I think sometimes, like from like a theme author perspective, it almost feels like themes are second class citizens on .org. And like you say, plugins get all these new, cool features long before themes do. And so I'd actually like us to, at least all of us, to be thinking, like, if we're on make teams and stuff, like, how can we bring things to themes before plugins get them sometimes, especially with things like the playground. Like, I thought it would have been a great starting point for themes before it would have been for plugins. But yeah, I think anybody who's a theme author probably feels what you're feeling, Ellen, Ellen, about wanting to showcase our work a little bit more on .org.
Yeah, it seems like at the very least the themes page should at least match the plugins page. I mean, even if you think that WordPress themes, these modern WordPress themes, are just like skins, which they are skins, but they are skins to, forgive my language, but they're skins to the most badass page builder that's to the most popular CMS on the planet, and so I think they deserve to be shown in that light to like build that excitement, and let authors tell a bit of a story to kind of get users interested and maybe get other developers interested. Oh, this looks cool, I want to build my own because I can see all the cool things it can do, and when I hit a demo link, it's like impressive, and like, it makes me emote something, and I'm not looking at like random blog posts that were created 20 years ago. So I think like that's the baseline, and even just getting to that baseline I think would be such a huge bump up. And I'm not even just saying this as somebody who has like a theme out there who's trying to like get exposure. I'm just saying that as a general WordPress user, I look at other themes too. I want to be able to see what they're actually capable of. I build sites for nonprofits. I would love to be able to send them there and say, hey, go click through a few of these and see what you like, and help you set it up. So I think those are all some great thoughts. And the designs that the Ellen was referencing, the kind of redesign of the themes directory, is an incredible start. I mean, that's like tailor-made to just be like, turn the dials, and we're pretty close, right? I mean, that's pretty close.
Yeah, I think that project is up. I wish Nick Diego were here because he has more information. I was trying to furiously find the post on that, but I know that work is underway, and I think we'll be flagging that when it comes up as how we can emphasize block themes, because I know Ellen, when we had that conversation with Matt, like, that is something that he's like, yeah, we should 100%. I feel very confident saying this and passing this on from him of like, yeah, we should 100% be pushing latest and greatest and the folks who are using that and the new way of WordPress, because users don't know, and that's our responsibility on the website to do. So yeah, this is inspiring me to go back through that. I should go back to that conversation and see what we can shake loose in the coming months, because especially with the redesign, I think we've been on hold. But once that's out, I think getting feedback in there, I think will be very appreciated and needed. And I wanted to call out, Rich, you mentioned in the chat a playground blueprint where you can pick patterns, templates, post content, image sources, maybe as like a demo link. And I don't know if folks saw that live preview for plugins went live and then quickly went away once some feedback came in. Again, feedback is awesome. But I agree. I think that could be a neat thing to explore. And I don't know, Rich, if you want to say more about that, but that just stood out to me in the comments as a great use case of that compared to a plugin. It seems less. Again, opt-in, folks can opt in and create like a certain setup for it through the playground link. I think would be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, we do have, classic themes have the starter content API, which essentially could be ported into like a playground blueprint method where you can say like, I want these pages published, and so it's like, okay, now you have about page, you have a contact page, a blog. I want to use this template, which is really sourcing from your patterns, and then I want to use these attachments, which are referenced within the patterns. I think we could probably extend what's been there forever that never really took off. I'll post it here. There's some themes leveraged it, but not very many. into something that's sustainable, because it would just be a JSON file that you would maybe include it with the theme, and maybe it's just omitted in the theme package. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this would be good to play with. Yeah, this might be a good track issue or something to open up after this as a result of this conversation, even just to play around with it and kind of start down that path. Because it does feel like it just right now, it feels like connecting dots. It's just like we got to put these two things together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I imagine plugins would use the same, pretty much the same system, if not the exact same system, if they wanted to say like, yeah, I want to demo with this particular theme. Like that would be pretty cool if a plugin could say that. Like pick a WooCommerce theme that it wants to highlight with these settings and these pages. I think we can come up with something standard that would work and still be super flexible.
Yeah, I love that. I think you know, one thing with the demos, the current demos, not so great. Giving people the flexibility. The thing with theme demos is authors always create their own demos because they want to be able to like showcase the best version of it. So you know, short of a .org solution on that, I know this is going to sound totally bonkers, but even just giving people a link to their own demo. I know that's harder to police and everything, but we're kind of already letting them link to their site. Anyway, I don't know. That's a whole can of worms. But I think what could be something to work towards is being able to have theme authors have a demo that's so good on .org that they link to that instead of their own demo. Like, can we achieve that? Can we let them create a demo that's so good that they think, I don't need my own demo. This is the demo here. I think that is certainly something we should aim for. And it doesn't even have to be like, you know, the craziest bells and whistles. It just has to look good. And I think with the power of patterns and content and pages full of patterns, I think we can do that. It's just a matter of getting everyone to focus on themes for a bit in that way.
Yeah, I'll actually say that idea has been floating around for ages. You know, just have like a multi-site setup for theme authors to customize, you know, what's available and show off their theme in the best light. It has been hard to really get a, I guess, full agreement. External demo links, I will say, are that is a big can of worms, and that would have to be discussed within like the themes team on .org, and maybe even beyond that.
Yeah.
So I would lean toward like let's discuss getting that multi-site set up or some sort of solution on .org itself. It makes the themes team live much easier when they're reviewing, to not have to worry about what might come from, you know, what might be on some external link or something.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So if everyone is cool, I'll dive a little bit deeper. And we've been talking kind of high level. And I think there's some granular stuff that might be helpful to cover. Is everyone cool? Kind of diving in there a bit. Cool. Okay. So yeah, you know, I opened saying that like my struggles with block theming are not the tooling anymore. They used to be. They're not. I can build a full layout. I got all the blocks I need. Once I get a contact form block one day, I'll be the happiest man on the planet. So all those things are good. So my kind of the hurdles I face in building a distributed theme, something that needs to be maintained regularly and version controlled and things like that. The hurdles I have are on that level of kind of workflow and code management and building and maintaining. And I think I could really frame a lot of this around patterns, and that kind of covers, I think, a lot of it. So, you know, we're able to build these sites, these themes largely, but entirely in the site editor. So you can bring all that stuff together in the editor, you can build everything and kind of get it how you want it. And then I think that's where the kind of trouble starts for some people, is like, okay, now I have this whole thing in here, it's good, how do I get it out of here? And so there's a few ways of doing that. You can export your theme in the site editor. That's one way. You can use the create block theme. And so if you already have a local repo set up, and you go into create block theme and you click I don't remember what it is, export or save, it will write those changes to the theme, and then those are in version control, or it's in they've written into the theme, so then they can be committed and pushed up and stuff. And so I think that is a good start, and I think the theme teams understand that this is a problem that needs to be solved, and so that's a good start. I feel like really doubling down on that, and maybe even refining that interface and kind of digging in a little more and understanding like those other little edge cases, and kind of making that the de facto tool for doing it. Because right now, create block theme is kind of like a catch-all for lots of little odds and ends that we're facing in building block themes. And it's great to have, but it can feel like the workflow is kind of an afterthought. It's like, oh, I got to go download this thing and click this button and then read the tagline and make sure that's the thing you want to do, and then save it, and then it's magically in your theme. So like I said, it's a great start, and I think that is the foundation of where we go from here. Now with patterns we're iterating on patterns regularly. We're adding more features, we're learning the limits and the potential with them, and so excuse me, that dictates the kind of features that we do with them. So but with patterns, I was building patterns really early. When I was working at WP Engine, I kind of led the team to create the pattern manager plugin, because I was like, dude, we got patterns coming out the ears, and maintaining them is so difficult, because before you could create them in the interface, you'd have to just create them in a post or a page. You'd have to then take that content, put it into a file. If it had images, you had to rewrite that dynamic tag to make sure it was coming from the theme. And so after doing that for a few weeks, I was like, this is bonkers. We gotta come up with a plugin for this. So we did. We created a pattern manager. It kind of let you manage the patterns, obviously, and it did a lot of that stuff under the hood. So it took those images automatically and moved them for you, added a dynamic tag, template tag. It would categorize them and give you an interface to do that. And then most importantly, it wrote them to disk. And so this tool is around the context of, this is a theme for distribution. And so anything that we do with a pattern is going to save to the disk, and it's then can be written to version control, could be pushed up to GitHub, etc. Then when I need to update that for release, I come in and do it again. As far as I know, I don't think create block theme does touch patterns right now. And so if you create patterns in the interface, and maybe somebody else has solved this, but if you create patterns in the interface, like in the my patterns thing, you save it, I don't think those get exported. And so we're left still with no great way of managing patterns. And so you have to, again, if you don't use a tool like Pattern Manager, which by the way is not working anymore. It seems like the day I left, they were like, we don't care about patterns anymore. So that tool doesn't quite, it's got some quirks, so it's not the best. But yeah, so now we're in a situation where if you have patterns, and my Ollie theme has like 50 patterns, I'm not going to add a ton more, but just maintaining them, I think, is important to understand that anytime I have to update it, I have to like go in and then change the content or design, and I have to pull it back out, put it manually in a file. I have to, currently my strings are not even localized, because that's a whole manual process. And then if you bring that pattern in and edit it, and you have to translate the strings again, change the tags, the image tags on there. So that is a very painful process. And I feel like if that's something that Create Block Theme can do, grab those patterns, automatically translate the strings, move the images if necessary. I know that's a little more opinionated of a thing, but anything we can do around pattern management, because like I've been building patterns for years at this point. If you were to tell this to a new user, like that's how you create patterns and for distribution, I think they're going to say like, no way, I'm not doing that every time. So I think that has been a huge illuminating thing for me in particular is around pattern workflows, management, etc.
That's an excellent call. I do want to note that 6.4 will include a way to import export patterns just with a JSON file, but I agree there's a lot that you just described that I think is good to keep in mind, especially as we have more themes with like 50 patterns. Like TT4 has 24 has a ton of patterns. Like what sort of pain points are going to come up from that, which I think is part of the process of building these default themes. I do think there are some folks on this call, I will not put anyone on the spot, who have worked on the Create Block Theme plugin. So I would be curious to hear if anyone wants to chime in who's worked on that, maybe about like what might be possible or if we should open issues in a certain place or, because I'll find a place to follow up with this feedback just around the desire for improved pattern management. Although I imagine it might be on the radar.
Pattern management was definitely something that we wanted. I know some of us
Thanks
wanted
for
to put into
Jason.
Create Block Theme. But actually, the pattern manager that y'all built was the one that we pointed people towards because this is the solution that worked right now. And we just didn't have the bandwidth to get that into Create Block Theme yet. So that is clearly and loudly a UI part that isn't covered really anywhere well right now. Definitely, I think needs attention somewhere. For sure. And the workflow of using Create Block Theme really is kind of a playground, I think, for what is going to happen in Gutenberg eventually. And I think we've done some transitions into the site editor. I think that was hopefully a good step in the right direction for the experience workflow. But there's still, like you said, it's got so much more potential of what needs to be done to make that workflow better. There's just so much work to do.
Yeah, and I totally hear that. And as like I said, I was working ahead of the curve is usually where I'm at, just because I'm just a curious person like that, and I see all this technology, and I just have years of pent up WordPress ideas in my head, and so and that's why I think it raises a good question of what is the responsibility of WordPress in terms of workflow, and then where does like custom tooling come in, and that's why I got our team at WP Engine to build the pattern manager thing, because it was like, this is not happening in WordPress anytime soon. It's a very opinionated thing, and but I see now the as prolific as patterns are becoming, and the potential that these are the building blocks of beautiful page layouts and dynamic population of pages with the the layout selector and things like that. This is where I'm seeing so much potential that it only makes sense that we invest heavily into making sure that the pattern workflow and local development and management of them is like top tier.
Yeah, I see Anne has my ticket that she asked me to open. Of course, I had a block.
I forgot about this.
Yeah, I had a block pattern manager plugin, but mine was geared specifically toward users. What Mike had did when he was at WP Engine, that was very much a developer tool, and that's what I think we really like. Forget about what I link in there, and let's see if we can bring in what you've done into Create Block Theme. That way it can be put into a distributable theme.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, for what it's worth, I don't know. I haven't worked at WP Engine for several months now, but that plugin has not seen any updates. I don't think any major things, but at the same time, the repo is open, and even if the team has moved on, there may be some valuable bits in there, or at least using it, looking at it like philosophically, what problem it was solving, because the problem it was solving is still the problem today. So I think there's some valuable nuggets in there somewhere.
Agreed. I will kind of recap all the stuff that comes up and add it to that GitHub issue. But I also really want to encourage folks to just chime in with your own experience. And I often, one of the things I love about how development works in WordPress is suddenly an issue from 3 years ago that has a ton of feedback can get addressed. And so we can kind of lay the groundwork for, these are the exact pain points. This is what would be most helpful to have. This is the most painful part. Ellen, tell me.
Yeah. So our experience always was, and I know it's like super difficult to get this going, but always like just seeing the components, same like patterns is one thing, then style variations is really something that like gets more and more powerful. And we have been like working with that on our later theme and just seeing like, oh my God, we can really change the design with style variations of a theme. That's like crazy. There's so many possibilities now. So I think these are all the components of block themes, and our idea just from the beginning was always, and I know like Rich, you've been like working on that too, and it's hard to get like, how do we get all these components out of a block theme and make them like kind of interchangeable if possible. So yeah, the pattern library was one of the things like, oh, that's so cool. Can I maybe get the patterns in there, and then just people can pull different patterns into their theme, and also like export style, like have a library of style variations available on WordPress org, something like that, and have them export importable into different themes. Like how can we do that? So kind of like one of the pain points I felt with building block themes was that we wanted to have it so like component based and kind of loose, not put everything into one theme and have it like locked into the theme, but make it more like of an open space where we can like pull the individual components in and out of different themes. That I think that would be the greatest potential, but it's not really happening like easily, and you have to really think about what you're doing. But I think, yeah, getting actually the patterns and page templates out of just one theme would be so cool, and also probably most likely easier to maintain them in the long term. So I think that's a little sad at the moment if it's happening. Like Mike said, yeah, we have 15 patterns in my theme, and they're kind of locked into the theme. Maybe you want to build a next theme, another theme, and have them in there. Like that's what we kind of felt like. Okay, we have this patterns in the theme. Now we want to get them out, use them in the next theme. Like, do we have to rebuild them again? That's kind of like not ideal. So that was one of the things, like the main problem we are focusing with block themes, like get the components reusable without putting them in each theme, because that's kind of like not ideal. So we kind of started with patterns. Now we are into playing with style variations a lot right now for our next free themes that we're building, and we're facing the same issue again. Like, do we have to repeat maybe 20 style variations we're building, put them in each theme? That's not really cool. Like, how can we maybe have tools to kind of pull them in and out? And yeah, the pattern library is a great start for patterns. Now we would be cool to have the same things for style variations. Fonts will be solved luckily with the font library, I feel. So that's amazing to get them out of the theme, like each theme. Yeah, but that would be cool to have more ways to get this thought of component based thinking available to the themes.
It's come up with theme JSON where you can indicate pulling in patterns from the pattern directory using theme JSON. And I actually was just talking, Rich and I did like this is the wrong, I pulled Rich into a Slack huddle being like, hey, can we talk about that? What's your experience with this? Because this is, I would love to get feedback on this, because kind of what you're describing is like, imagine a world where you put all of your patterns into the pattern directory, and let's pretend we implement a way to filter by author and author collection. Let's pretend we allow a way for users to import their own patterns and favorited patterns from the pattern directory. This awesome issue from Carolina. So let's like have, let's pretend, right? And you know, you can have a theme source for individual patterns and all sorts of stuff. So now you're a theme author, you're building a new theme, and you're want to do exactly what you described. Just kind of be like, I want to reuse some patterns in this theme, some patterns in this theme, like that I've created, and I'm going to pull it all together. And right now, the experience, this is something that I was talking with some folks about and with Rich about, is like the experience of registering patterns from the pattern directory for themers like could be greatly improved. So going through that experience, there's a lot around like how to categorize it, and what it's like how they're registered. So patterns are shown provided by the directory rather than the theme when they're registered with theme JSON. So how can we change that? They also, if they don't match core categories, they're marked as uncategorized, so they're kind of lost. And there's not a way to, they're not visible in the pattern section like you'd expect with other theme patterns. And so this is another thing that even if we got it to the point where you were just mass submitting really high quality patterns to the pattern directory, which would be awesome to have, because that does pain me when I see a bunch of new block themes and then none of the patterns are pulled into the pattern directory. Because it feels like a big missed opportunity. Because ideally the workflow could be that you're just referencing them through theme JSON, and block themers know to just add them to the pattern directory, because it could save some time. But yeah, I haven't responded to you, Rich. I apologize.
All good.
Yeah, wanted to flag that up. And agreed on like style variations. I think we need to figure something out eventually there. And I don't know if it's going to be another directory or how that's going to work, but Ellen, you touch on the interoperability of all of it, which is ultimately the aim.
Yeah, I think that leaning into 2024, like you said, Mike, has been really good for exposing some of these especially more complex issues that we have that have been around for a while. It's just like now it's putting them into a real theme. Like 2023 was great, but it was really just exploring what we could do. This is like, how can we make this an actual experience? So one of the things that I've really leaned into is like the idea of, I posted here in the chat, is, and this is related to what you're saying, Ellen, about the colors and some sort of fallback mechanism. So like, it doesn't matter what your slugs are. If you use accent, use primary, or primary wouldn't work, but if you use accent or contrast or base, then it would just fall back using the numeral system back from 2 to 1 to 0. And then the same could be applied to color sets. So that's like theme specific styles for a section. So a pattern could have colorway 1 and use accent 1 and base 2. And the theme decides what accent 1 base 2 is, not the pattern. Because if the pattern decides and you fall back to a color that the theme doesn't have, it's going to be whatever the default value is for the theme, which could be black, but then now the background's also black and your text is black and the pattern's broken and it doesn't work. And I think if we solve that front, we could potentially leverage the pattern directory much more, because then now patterns are designed by the theme, but the layout and the structure is applied by the pattern. And the same issue happens with
I remember
variations.
having that conversation regarding color definition or descriptive versus semantic colors, like 2 years ago, for the use in patterns, and didn't really go anywhere. And here we are again, like talking about the potential of outlining this in a configurative way and allowing the content to use that configuration, but we don't have that bridge, to marry the two. So I hope we do.
Yeah, and I think that 2024 is like a perfect use case to be like, these are the things that we had to cut out because this situation didn't work. It doesn't work. Like we can't have, if we have another light variation, 2 light variations, maybe they're different colors, then we have different amount of accent colors. So variation 1 might have 5 accent colors. Variation 2 might have 1. It might just be black and red and white, for example. But now what happens is if the text color is black and the background color is a dark red in the variation, then the obviously it's not going to work. So you try to invert stuff. So inversion works, but then past that point, your accent colors always have to be light on the variation, or always have to be dark to map to the right base color. And so, like, I think what you were saying, Ellen, and also Jason, just trying to figure out a system where the variation can fall back to whatever it decides. Let the patterns hold, just like hey, like this if this theme supports colorway 7, say there's 7, it doesn't matter how many there are, say there's 7, then sure, use the colorway 7 variables that which say use the light blue and the dark blue buttons and the black text. And that's totally cool. But if it doesn't have colorway 7, fall back to 6. If it doesn't, go to 5, go to 4, go to 2, all the way back to nothing, to where it's just like if you had a very minimal theme with only black and white, it would still look black and white and look great. So I think trying to nail like the way the colors work in a system across the board, I think is really what we need to figure out. And then we could say, like, on the thing, on the pattern directory, we could say, like, this is this really cool pattern, let's make it colorway 1, let's make it colorway 4, just like randomize it almost, so that we have a lot of variation without having to repeat ourselves, and even across different themes. I think it could be very interesting to explore that.
Agreed. I want to be mindful of time, just because I do like to keep this about an hour. But yeah, Mike, I wanted to just anything else on your mind right now that you're like, I didn't get to this. And also, we can always do this again. So that's the beauty of the open source community. This is not a one-time thing. This can definitely continue, and it seems like it needs to, with how many folks have shown up and the thoughts that are being shared.
Yeah, I don't think I have any other granular feedback. I think the stuff around patterns, I think, is like I said, that's about patterns, but it actually exposes a bigger thing, and around workflows and ironing those out, those unintuitive things about building these things. Because like I said, once you're in the editor, things make a lot more sense. There's still a lot to learn, still a lot to iron out. But to me, it's the underside of it that is going to trip people up once they start doing it. So yeah, if we can just keep keep that energy going around themes, and because I think there's a potential that we have the baseline of themes works, right? We have block themes in the directory, so it seems like themes are here. And so there's a potential that we just accept that and then move on to flashier other things. But I think we have to just like really recognize that themes are here and they're great, but they have a lot of work to kind of set the stage for the next 10 years. So we can't let up on the gas. Classic themes they were cooking in the crock pot for 20 years. So we had ironed out all the kinks and kind of the standards were there, and so there was a lot of content around them, third-party products, there's a whole massive ecosystem, and we just don't have that for block themes yet. It's going to take a while. We need quality content, tutorials. I've made it a habit of while building block themes, if I'm thinking of something and I'm like, well, somebody's gonna run into this, I try to make a video about it, or write it down, or write a blog post. The more we can share and educate along the way with these things, the more that kind of content ecosystem builds. And we get back to kind of where we were with classic themes, where it's like nobody's question whether or not we're building block themes. It's just like what kind and how well and all that stuff. So
I love that. I think that's a great spot to end. I do want to fully wrap up, and Jess, I'm going to put you on the spot, both to share about the hallway hangout that you have going on later on, and also I wanted to share the awesome work that Justin's been doing to overhaul the theme handbook, which I think ties in really nicely with what you just shared, Mike, around building up more content. And I think part of this is, as this handbook gets updated, it's another great opportunity for feedback. And that's part of what the evolution of the outreach program at this point is going to shift more into, is adoption of block themes, and what we can do to make that as easy as possible, which on my mind still includes thinking about end users a little bit for myself. But the folks who are taking over the outreach program are going to specifically think about from a block theme perspective and plugin perspective. And part of this is launching these kinds of overhauls and getting feedback. So I just wanted to note this, and Justin, I know there's like an update of some sort coming soon, but I'd love to end on you talking about the upcoming Hallway Hangout today, if you're up for it.
Okay, yeah, just quickly on the handbook, we'll get the link for that, link, if you'll share in the chat. Any feedback right now, those are great. I think there's like 5 chapters drafted, so, and it's just mostly been me writing this, so I'm sure there's plenty of mistakes that need to be corrected. But I am also linking in the chat, we'll have a hallway hangout in 2 hours from now. Nick Diego, Ryan Welcher, and myself will be covering some WordPress 6.4 features, but I'm hoping that we'll mostly keep it a casual conversation and have good questions and answers from everyone. But please join us if you can. Awesome.
We'll wrap up here, but stay tuned for more of these. I imagine they'll happen with more frequency, and I think a lot of good stuff was brought up today. And one of my favorite things is that it matches other conversations. Like, I love that overlap. It means we're onto something good, and there's high impact stuff we can do here. So thank you so much for joining, all 20 of you. That's 20 human hours. So thank you. Take it really seriously. And thank you, Mike, for being game to record this and opening it up. Not everyone is. So I think it's really cool that you were game to jump in there. Sweet.
Totally.
See you all.
Thanks, folks. Later.
Yeah.